Hi, Diana. Hi, Annette. Hello.
Hello, hello. Happy Patty Day, y'all.
Yes, it's finally feeling like spring, so
I
it's
know, right?
amazing. Hey, Ben.
Ben, we missed you last week.
I am back. I am glad that Annette, who's here, was able to fill in so capably.
Yes, she did. She did a wonderful job.
My goal is just to write myself out of my own existence. So if I can get people to do this better than me, the more the merrier. Summer, just so you know, we made 1434. I put it as the first bill on the slide to review, and so I'll just hand it over to Anna then.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's perfect. And if there's anything just like that you want to say just off the top about it, feel free to. And she said she's happy to jump in for any other context or things like that.
Cool.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're just going to give folks a minute here to get on the line since we're right at the top of the hour.
Hey, Summer.
Hey, Michelle. Good to see you. Hi, Heather.
Good afternoon. It's great to see everyone.
Great. And I'm sure folks will keep joining in the next minute or so, but I know we do have quite a lot on the agenda today, just based on where we are in the session. So I might just get us started. This is the same agenda we always have. So I will hand it over to Heather and Michelle to give any welcome comments or opening remarks you want to make.
Sure. Well, I'll start, seeing that Heather is in the car. So thanks for joining us while traveling, Heather. First, a fair warning. I am not contagious, not that it matters because we're virtual, but I'm still getting over the flu. So I'm coughing and sniffling and not 100% myself. But I'm excited to hear what Ben has to share, and just forgive me if I have to pause and cough halfway through some remarks. But thanks everyone for joining us, and feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat so we know everyone who's on the call. And I will pass over to Heather to say hi if she's able.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. It is terrific to be with you. And Michelle, thank you for being such a terrific partner, even when not at 100%. So yeah, I know happy St. Patrick's Day and crossover day. I hope it's a lucky one for our legislators and issue areas. So thanks so much, Summer and Ben and Annette, and I will turn it back over to you.
Great, thank you both. We'll just do a quick roll call to see who among the voting members are here. Is there anyone here from Senator Hester's office? Okay. LaMonica Jones. Okay. Do we have Dr. Lansing on the line? All right. Do we have Steve McHenry on the line?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, great. Thanks, Steve. And it looked like Nancy Nunn just joined a moment ago. I saw her name pop up. Do we have Dr. Range on the line? Okay, and then I saw Diana Taylor already. So we are good to go on the roll call. And as was already mentioned, if you can put your name in the chat, it'll help us just keep track of who is here and make sure that we're sending follow-ups to the right folks. So if you haven't done so already, please put your name in the chat. And I'll cover a couple of quick announcements before we get into what we're all here to talk about. First is that we have another one of these meetings same time next week. So on Monday, March 24th, 1 to 2 p.m., we'll have another one of these. We're expecting that a lot could happen in that week, so it should be a good one. Also of note, next week, we've got our Distribution and Access Committee meeting. You can see the time here, and you can find details for joining on the FSRC website. And then we have our next Environment and Production Committee meeting on April 10th. The next full council meeting is on April 17th, so that'll be 10 a.m. to noon. And again, for this group, that one is one that you probably will not want to miss because we're going to do a full session debrief, just going through with our colleagues at CHHS what the status is of all the bills that we were tracking here that were related to food systems. So those are just meetings to be aware of. Per usual, here's the information if you want to join these meetings on a regular basis. You all were able to join already, so clearly you found this. And with that, I think I can hand it over to Ben and Annette, and I'll stop sharing so that you are able to do so for the bill review.
Thank you so much, Summer. Let me just get the slide deck going. I want to, first of all, thank Annette, who filled in for me last week. I was actually down in Annapolis, but word is she did a fantastic job. So major thanks to Annette for filling in. So like Summer said, we have a lot to talk about today. We are doing our best as we reach this crossover day to keep our tracker updated. Annette and I and a couple other people were in the tracker over the weekend, and a lot is going to happen between now and midnight tonight. So the link is here, and we will do our best to keep our tracking sheet up to date. Today is crossover day, so that means for a bill to advance through the legislative process, it generally has to pass its original chamber today. I say generally because there are always some exceptions, and I'll note this year I expect maybe a couple more exceptions than usual. You think about something like the sugar tax. It's possible, I'm not saying it's likely, but it's possible that as the General Assembly looks for ways to raise revenue, they might push certain bills after the crossover deadline if they make a decision that that's the route that they want to take. So it's a general rule that bills have to advance through their original chamber, but not an ironclad rule. And with that in mind, most of what we're going to talk about today is amendments to the bills that we have discussed throughout this legislative session. So a lot of bills have advanced, several of them have been amended, and some of them have been amended significantly. Of perhaps most interest to this group is House Bill 1434. So this was going to be a work group on studying food deserts. That bill has been amended to call for a healthy food priority area study. So the work group is eliminated. That study would now be the responsibility of the Food System Resilience Council. And I know we have Anna Sierra on the call. I don't know if she wants to say anything about that bill or how it was amended or kind of anything else on House Bill 1434.
Thanks, Ben. I don't have a ton to talk about on how it was amended. I know there was, some discussion in committee about the fact that the Food Resiliency Council already focuses on things, at least by statute, called food deserts. I think this was not quite what we had in mind, at least on the Senate side, but it was amended this way. So we just saw this morning. It's on the third reading, which means it's almost certainly going to get moved at least across to the Senate today. And so I think, given that it's been pared back and as a study, it's far likely to move across the Senate in this form than its original form. So I do think this has probably a much better chance of passing in this form than it did in its original form.
Thank you, Anna. And I also just wanted to open the floor, since this is of specific relevance to FSRC, for anybody who wants to chip in. I see Nancy.
Actually, I see Steve just put his face up, so Steve might be able to answer a couple of these questions. I know that originally, if I remember correctly, the study, the lead agency was not MDEM, it's another agency. And I think that was one of the questions that we initially had, Anna, if I remember, is how the logistics would all play out if there was a work. And we don't need to get in all that now, but I'm just trying to understand, and also if there's a time frame suggested in the legislation.
So I can actually answer both of those questions.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ben.
Not to supersede you, Steve, because I'm sure you have a lot to say. The original version of this bill, it was going to be staffed by the Department of Housing and Community Development. Obviously, that changes with these amendments. And then for the FSRC study, under the bill as amended, it would be due in December of this year. So by the end of December 2025, a report would be due to the General Assembly.
Yeah, and that's the question I have. Thanks, Ben. The question I have is, does MDEM have the resources to support the Food Resiliency Council in its work that the General Assembly is now giving us to be done super quick by December 1st? So that's the practical question I have for Anna.
It's a good practical question. So yeah, so the bill is amended to make the Food Resiliency Council, actually, it doesn't mention MDEM anywhere here specifically, but since the FSRC is now an entity under MDEM would ultimately be responsible for making sure this got done. So it switches it from a work group to a study, which is certainly less resource intensive than the original format of the bill. We would work through the existing Food Resiliency Council. I think understanding that the Food Resiliency Council is made up of volunteers who freely give their time and don't necessarily have the capability to go doing research, we will be putting in a fiscal note for the amended version. So we're working on refining that right now, but we would anticipate contracting out through our existing interagency agreements, task order to do the like meat and potatoes study aspect of this. And then, would look to the Food Resiliency Council, as we have since its inception, for thoughts on the study and then formalizing those recommendations, I think, is where the Food Resiliency Council would actually come into play.
So you're prepared for the bill to actually pass in the form that it's left the House or is leaving the House today?
Yeah, I think, based on the number of co-sponsors that it picked up and the clear intent, at least in the House, to get something done on this, I think their way of getting something done on this is paring it back to what it is now. So I guess we'll see what happens in the Senate, but I know the Senate's big concern was the work group component and the amount of kind of lift for that and the seeming duplication of effort with the Food Resiliency Council. And so it just never moved out of the Senate. So I think that this might have legs once it hits the Senate for that reason.
So your fiscal note will say it's going to cost you X amount of money, but you can absorb it. Is that basically what you're telling us?
We don't intend to absorb the costs. MDEM is almost entirely federally funded, and so the federal funds we have are for emergency management, and this would not qualify as emergency management, and so we would not be able to use federal funds for this. They would have to provide us general funds for this.
Oh,
so
okay.
That's what the fiscal note would be, and we're actually working on language for that right now. Now, they could certainly say, that's cute, you have to do this, and we're not giving you any money, which is what we would anticipate, in which case we would, do our best to meet the legislative intent, but it would be limited because it would be limited to, Annika's time and capability and the generous time offered by the Food Resiliency Council members.
Understood. So the fiscal note could derail the bill potentially.
We have found that when studies are in, especially when the fiscal note is like less than $100,000, they'll just say, too bad, so sad, do it anyways, and not give us any money.
Understood.
I know, Anna, you love nothing more than when they require MDEM to do something but do not provide money to MDEM. I know that's
I
it.
love that for us. Yes, I do. I know there's a lot of hands raised. I will just say, I know this isn't necessarily something that's like super transparent, but given all of the conversation around federal funding and the uncertainty around federal funding, I do think it's helpful for Food Resiliency Council members to understand that we have a very small portion of our budget is general funds. About 70% of our staff are federally funded, and they're federally funded through emergency management specific grants, which means unless we can very clearly tie the work that's being done to the requirements of those grants, then it is challenging for us to like shift priorities or shift staff to work on projects that are not already included in one of our investment justifications or could like clearly fall under the overall mission of the emergency management section of the department. So we do have a limited flexibility with like reassigning existing personnel because of that. So
Thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. I saw Heather's hand was up, so I want to see if she has anything she wants to add.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. And thanks, everybody, for the input and thoughtful discussion around these changes. And I'm so glad to see Ann Palmer, our former terrific co-chair, here and weighing in. I'm curious if anybody knows if there have been any additions in either the House or the Senate versions specifying the definition of food deserts or identifying what the primary goal is, because I think it could be affordable access, it could be nutritious access, it could be geographic access. So I think there's a wide variety of ways that it could be interpreted, but I think it's always helpful to understand from the beginning what the goals are. And I'll just add to Ann's comment that I think a literature review on successful interventions to address food deserts or healthy food priority areas would be particularly helpful, because I think, unfortunately, you often see policy efforts that are designed to address this work that don't actually have the intended impact. And it's locally or even at a state level exceptionally difficult to mitigate these issues. And so I think setting up expectations in advance of what the goals are will be helpful in making whatever effort is put forward actually useful. So it's my two
So
cents.
Heather, I just put in the chat the text of the third reading version of this bill. I can read it because it's that short. This is the entirety of the bill. In this section, healthy food priority area means a predominantly low-income area that has limited access to retail outlets that sell affordable, healthy foods. The FSRC shall conduct an assessment of strategies to attract and retain grocery stores and supermarket retailers in healthy food priority areas, including a review of existing incentives and available financing programs in the state and other states, and prepare a report on the council's finding and recommendations regarding strategies to attract and retain grocery stores and healthy food priority areas. And then that's it until the uncodified language about, I guess this is codified language, but the fact that it's due December 31st. That is the entirety of the bill.
So
Thank
room
you.
for interpretation.
Any other comments on this, especially as it pertains directly to our state food council, as you will? I'm sure there will be more to come as we see, what happens via next steps for this bill. So thanks so much, Ben, and please keep going.
Sure thing. All right, I'm going to go through some more bills and their amendments. HB 1090 was stripped from its previous version. It's now a much simpler bill that just requires MHEC to include a question about food insecurity as part of the Maryland College aid processing system. So this comes from a broader bill that would have addressed food insecurity in institutes of higher education. Now the bill has been basically crossed out in its entirety, except for in uncodified language, MHEC is required to include a question about food insecurity through the Maryland College aid processing system application. And even then, even with that amendment, the bill passed on what was close to a party line vote in the House. So any questions on 1090? Maryland Agricultural Commission and Young Farmers. This bill has advanced in both chambers. The Senate passed the bill unamended. The House did add an amendment. It just listed some new requirements for the Maryland Agricultural Land Preservation Foundation Board of Trustees, also in uncodified language. Given that there's not really that great of a substantive difference between the two bills and that they've both passed their original chambers, I assume that legislators will work out the differences here. But that bill seems to be on its way to passage. All right, this is a big one. House Bill 42, which has only passed second reading in the House, but we assume it'll pass third reading later today. This was previously the bill that set up that solid waste disposal surcharge. That surcharge would have funded the on-farm organics and wasted food reduction program. The funding mechanism in that bill has been amended. So there would no longer be a solid waste disposal surcharge. The program that's set up in the bill, the on-farm organics and wasted food reduction diversion grant program, would be funded by money transferred from the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund at the governor's discretion. So that's a big change for this one. It gets rid of the surcharge, and the funding at the governor's discretion would come from the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund. So since that's a big change, I'll stop there and see if anybody has questions. I know, Steve, this is a bill that you've been working on.
Actually, I've not been working on it, but I did notice it moved unexpectedly to me. So I really don't know much more about it than what I heard in the subcommittee session on Friday.
All right. Guess I should have put you on the spot then there. So yeah, the Senate version has not moved. Assuming the House version gets passed, we'll see what happens in the Senate.
I think, Ben, did they add a couple of other funding options along with this program?
so not in the language of the bill. They might have considered them at the subcommittee level, and those funding mechanisms still might be under consideration, but from what I saw, that is the funding mechanism in the third reading version of the bill.
Oh, okay.
So, Ben, what is the Maryland Strategic Energy Investment Fund? Or maybe not Ben, but someone on the call might know.
You want me to try to answer that, Ben?
Yeah, sure.
This is a fund that is maintained by the Maryland Energy Administration, and it funds a number of programs. I don't know exactly what they all go towards, but it's got a fair amount of money in it. I know as part of the bigger budget resolution and reconciliation process, they're moving money around. I think the governor moved money around in supplemental budget number 1 from the CEF. This is called the CEF. And so there's a bunch of cash there. So I think they're reallocating at the governor's discretion a portion of that money to fund this program.
Okay. Thank you, Steve.
Any other questions on this one? I know it's a big change. All right, seeing none, I will move on. The State Department of Education Local Food Purchasing Program bill, I know we talked about. The amendments kind of restructure the bill a little bit. The way the amended bill is structured, at least in the House where this bill has passed, is that the Department of Education would establish a program contingent on available funding for the procurement of local food for, I guess I should say for local schools. So local food for local schools. It also adds a role for the Department of General Services in the bill. The previous bill established this proximity for what counts as local food at 200 miles. The amended bill moves that to 250 miles. But I think the main difference, the main thrust of the amendment here is the department would be able to administer this program only when funding is available. Oops. And no movement on that in the Senate, just the House version of the bill. Questions on that one? House Bill 104, Senate Bill 226. This is one that's passed both chambers. A very minor amendment in each version of the bill. It simply expands the definition of person in the bill. It's quite an expansive definition. A person can be a county or a municipality or a private organization. I think just for the purposes of administering the Maryland Farms and Family Fund. But that's the only amendment. It just expands the definition of person.
Does Mark Powell have anything to add to that? Not
Mark?
to put Mark on the spot.
No, I don't.
Okay.
All right, so this is another pretty significant change. What was originally the Family Investment Program and Supplemental Nutrition Assistant Program benefits child support bill, which is that child support would not count as income for qualification for the Family Investment Program or SNAP. Couple of big changes here. There are no longer references to SNAP in this bill. So this would only apply going forward to funds under the Family Investment Program. And the bill is now structured to phase in gradually. So there'd be, for the first couple of fiscal years, only a small amount of income would be excluded, and then that gradually gets larger as we get to fiscal year 2031 when the bill would be fully implemented.
Ben, I have a question.
Yep.
Remind me again what FIP, Family Investment Program.
Uh-huh.
So what is included in that then, if it does not include SNAP? Emily, thank you so much.
Somebody who can answer this way better than I can.
Thank you, Emily.
Emily, yep.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. So essentially, I'll be honest with you, there's been a lot of back and forth with this specific bill. So I believe that the direction that this bill is going is that it's just going to be the pass-through amount for our cash assistance, so for the TCA program. So the SNAP portion has been completely taken out. So essentially, and I don't know that it's the amendments have been completely finalized. I know we're still working on it. But initially this bill, they were trying to get it gets really complicated. So I'm trying to think of the best way to explain it here for everyone without getting too deep into the weeds. But essentially, we do have some of our child support. So if there are support payments coming through, we are able to pass some of that directly to the custodial parent, currently the way the bill is. So what they were attempting to do was to pass all of the child support amount directly through and not count it towards their SNAP benefit calculations or towards their TCA grant. Unfortunately, the federal requirements for SNAP, we have to count the child support as income. So we went back and forth with that. And so I think that was the reason why they scrapped the SNAP piece. But we are working still where essentially if the non-custodial parent is paying child support benefit, that benefit will actually be passed, or at least a portion of that benefit will be passed directly to the family. The way that it currently works is the state absorbs some of that, and then we have to reimburse back to the federal government without getting too far into the weeds. But essentially that's what this bill is doing, just passing more of that funding directly to the family. Hopefully that helps.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Emily.
Yeah,
for
thank you,
getting it
Emily.
better than my ability to try and Google it. Well,
And I'll be
everybody's
honest with you, this one is really, honestly, we've spent a lot of time on this bill specifically, so it kind of gets really deep into the weeds, but that's kind of a really high overview. So hopefully that at least explains it enough for you all at this point.
Yeah, thank you, Emily, because the way I understood the bill before was mostly about its purpose to preclude that income from being counted toward the SNAP calculation. And so just having a better, more full understanding of the rest of it is really helpful. So thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. You're welcome.
Without seeing any other questions on that one, the Hunger-Free Campus Program. So this one is a Senate-only bill. It does not have a House cross-file. This is a bill that extends the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program to non-public institutions of higher education. There was a requirement in the original bill that the governor appropriates starting in fiscal year 27, I believe, $250,000 to the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program. That requirement has been removed via amendment. So it takes away that mandatory funding. Questions on this one? So that's it in terms of significant amendments. All the other amendments that we've seen for these bills that have passed are either non-existent, they passed without being amended, or they're technical amendments like adding co-sponsors. But this is kind of a rundown of what's passed so far. We talked about those first two. Maryland Farms and Family Fund passed both the Senate and the House. We talked about Maryland Agricultural Commission and Young Farmers Bill. Oyster shucking has passed both chambers. The baby food labeling bill regarding toxic heavy metals passed the House. The Federal Commodity Supplemental Food Program unanimously passed both chambers unamended. We talked about the Family Investment Program Child Support Bill, talked about the MHEC bill. The Anne Arundel County bill, Senate Bill 131, that would provide a property tax credit for supermarkets in Anne Arundel County, that passed the Senate unanimously. The House version of the bill, second reading, has passed, so that one seems to be moving. And then we talked about the Hunger-Free Campus Grant Program. And then just one thing to flag on second reading bills. The Chesapeake Bay Legacy Act, which has that LEAF program, that has passed second reading. The last time I tried to look, I couldn't get a third reading version of the bill. It's possible that it's available now. There have been some amendments, so hopefully I'll be able to detail those next week because they just weren't available when I last looked. But that bill is going to be amended in some way. And then we talked about these two other bills. A list of the bills that haven't moved: foraging, urban agricultural property, blue catfish, cottage food products, CEP, direct-to-consumer sale of raw milk, sugar, beverage tax, Prince George's County property tax credit for grocery stores. Still nothing on any of those bills. And in terms of bills that have been withdrawn that we've talked about for a few weeks, on-farm home processing license, the food and milk product labeling bill, and then alcoholic beverages in supermarkets have all been withdrawn by their sponsors. Just a quick update on BRFA and the budget. The budget's really going to kick into high gear this week. So after crossover day ends today, the House is going to start moving on the budget. There's still a lot of uncertainty. What we know now is the estimated deficit for fiscal year 2026 is closer now to $3.3 billion, just given what's happening at the federal level. I guess one piece of good news, if you want to call it that, is they were bracing for a federal government shutdown, and that was averted. So that's, I guess, for now, one less area of concern. They're working through various revenue raisers / spending reductions. We don't know exactly where that's going to land. I know Senate President Ferguson said last week that if they don't accept something like that business-to-business tax that we talked about on one of our previous calls, then there are going to be drastic cuts to programs like Medicaid and other social services that certainly could impact the work that you all do as part of FSRC. So we'll just keep a close eye on it. We should have, at least the House is going to attempt to pass their version of the budget in the next week. Then it'll go to the Senate, and we will follow along closely to see exactly what's in the budget itself and the budget reconciliation bill. Federal policy update, like I said, down to the last minute, but Chuck Schumer, Senate Democratic leader, decided to vote for cloture on the Republican continuing resolution, and he got enough of his Democratic colleagues to go along. So no government shutdown. One thing that I think we were concerned about is that the continuing resolution cut $1 billion from the District of Columbia budget, which would be of concern to particularly those of you in Montgomery and Prince George's County. That could have downstream effects. It looks like that funding is going to be restored. So the Senate passed a separate provision restoring that funding by unanimous consent. President Trump says he supports restoring that funding, and there's support in the House as well. So assuming that gets through the House, that will be a sigh of relief for the District of Columbia. That is all I have for today. I know it's a lot of information, but we will keep plugging away, studying these amendments, figuring out what gets moved prior to crossover, and digging into the budget so that we can be informed for our call next week.
Thanks, Ben. Heather, anything to add to the presentation before we open it up?
No, nothing on my end. Thanks always, Ben, for keeping us so well updated. There's a lot of items to follow. So thanks again.
Any questions for Ben or any other items that we didn't discuss today that folks want to share?
Just to update on the Bay Legacy bill, I sat through 3 subcommittee voting sessions on that, so I got the details in my head. They worked out on the fisheries side of the bill. They worked out an agreement with the watermen's groups, and everybody's happy from the watermen's perspective. So DNR and the governor's office and the watermen's groups all developed a compromise that satisfies everybody on that. And then on the Department of Ag side of the bill with the LEAF program, they added in from Delegate Stein's bill on tidal buffers, a definition of tidal buffer to go into the Department of Ag side of the bill. So they're amending a little bit of another bill into that bill. Not a huge impact at all, just getting a definition of tidal buffer somewhere in law at the request of the Speaker Pro Tem. So that's what I know about the Bay Legacy bill.
Super helpful. Thank you so much, Steve.
Sure.
I'd like to listen to 3 hours of every subcommittee hearing, but alas.
Oh my gosh, you can waste, countless hours doing that,
Yeah.
which unfortunately I did over the weekend for some reason. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all of that with us, Steve. Your weekend activity update with us. Anyone else have an update that the group might be interested in related to the session? If not, I think I turn it over to Summer, right? Summer, for like some, the final slide.
Yeah, so there's not too much else to say here, but per usual, just want to make sure everyone has the contact info in case you want to reach out to the FSRC at any point about anything that's been discussed. And as always, we hope that you'll keep joining these weekly meetings and continue sharing if there's other things that you're tracking. Like Ben said, a lot is going to move between now and midnight, so there'll be a lot more to talk about next week. So with that, I think that's all we've got. Big thank you to Ben and Annette and to Michelle and Heather, and we'll see everybody at the same time next week. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.